It's Friday again, and that means it's time for another in our series, Fanzine Friday. Today we take a look at the Dungeoneer number 4 from February-March of 1977. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and welcome back to our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. This series is called Fanzine Friday, and each week we take a fanzine from my collection for a closer look. This week, that's Dungeoneer number 4, produced by Jennell Jaquays, March 1977. If you haven't seen one of these videos before, a fanzine is a magazine produced by fans for fans of a particular hobby. In our case, that's fantasy RPGs with a focus on Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of fantastic content to discuss today. I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so as we do each time, we are going to take a look through the Dungeoneer number 4. We'll take a look at the cover. These don't have table of contents, so I'll give you the table of contents. We'll go over some of the highlights and general impressions of this fanzine. As we do each time, we start here with the cover. This is Jaquays' art again. This one is a little different. It looks like it's a photograph, a black and white photograph, and then she's done her drawing and sort of somehow put that sort of superimposed over top of the photograph, which is a stone tower of some sort. Looks like probably somewhere in Europe, or styled after that. She's labeled this one Mongo the Mighty. As far as I can tell, he doesn't show up anywhere in the rest of the fanzine. He's sort of just a really huge fighter with a gigantic sword and a sort of simple happy face. So that's Mongo. Here's the editor's page, or the notes page, and this one is almost entirely taken up by this thing called Torchlight, where she tells you about other magazines and fanzines to help promote other people who are doing similar things. She talks about the Dragon magazine by TSR, Space Gamer, which is metagaming, Alarms and Excursion, which is pretty well known. We've mentioned that one before. And several here that I don't think I've talked about before. And since this is a fanzine channel, I want to take a moment and sort of talk about those because they're of interest to me, and if you're watching this video, they're probably of interest to you. The first one's called Leviathan. It comes from the UK. She says it's postal gaming, as well as some Dungeons & Dragons, Empire of the Petal Throne, some other things. Owl and Weasel, and if you know the history of White Dwarf, then you know that this was the predecessor to that. So it's the same people from Games Workshop. Evermist, which is actually, as far as I can tell from the research, and I've seen a couple copies of this, it seems to be just actually a fantasy literature, not fantasy RPGs. Something called Signal, which is actually from Canada, and she says it's a review zine, but she says not only do they talk about games, but they do reviews of fanzines. John Mansfield is the person who put that together, so I'm going to try and find copies of that, because if they talk about old fanzines in these, this 1977 era, I'm pretty keenly interested to see if they mention some other RPG fanzines I've never heard of. There's one called the Axis Newsletter. It seems to be more focused on wargaming, although she does mention there's something about D&D in there. News from Bree, which is one I've heard of, also comes from the UK. And there's several episodes or issues of that have been produced. I've got a few in my collection. And then another one called Quick Quincy Gazette, which she really apparently likes. She says it's good stuff with exclamation points, and then she says it's a Dungeoneer recommendation. That one's from Princeton, New Jersey. I don't think I have any episodes of that, but now that I see how much she liked it, I'm going to go back and look and see if I have a copy, and of course if I don't, try to find a copy. So a little longer than we normally spend on that page, but like I said, this is a fanzine discussion, so there's probably things you guys are interested in. Here's the table of contents. Just looked at the publisher's note. The Arcane Elders is the story that's been continuing since episode 1, and I now know, because I've more carefully looked at the rest, it goes all the way through episode 6, which we mentioned when we get there is the last one that Jaquays is really sort of in charge of. She has something on page 4 called the monster level tables. I guess apparently people had written in and said, can you go back through all the monsters that have been in the first few issues and tell us sort of what level she ranks them, level 1 through level 6. If you remember at the time, it was pretty common. You would sort of say, well, this is level 1 monster, which means it appears on the first level of your sort of mega dungeon for your campaign, and that means it's appropriate for first level characters. And so second level, third level, as you went down the dungeon, the monsters were supposed to be more difficult, and the characters were supposed to obviously be higher level before they would go there. Monster Matrix, we'll talk some more about some of the new monsters that are in this one. She has something called the Room of Crooked Magic, which is an interesting concept. We get some of this gonzo stuff in the early days, which I think is fantastic. This one is just a room you could put anywhere in your campaign or your dungeon in your town, and it's a bunch of gnomes who are basically experimenting on creating magical items. They're all, so that's why it's called crooked magic. They all sort of do weird things. So you've got like a scroll that's supposed to do something, but when you read it, it'll do the opposite. You got weapons that'll attack until they decide they're scared, and then they'll try and like run away or jump out of your hand to get away from the fight. So really clever stuff there. There's an article by Jim Ward, who is the author of Metamorphosis Alpha, telling everybody about the game and how it works. So it's sort of his view of the game to promote it. Magic Tomes Scrolls is another one of these articles by Jaquays. It's more for the referee or the player who's really interested in rules, and she's actually there trying to explain. She says there seems like there's a lot of confusion about how all this stuff works with magic users and how do they learn magic. What did the chart mean? If you remember, this is during OD&D. So we've got the original wood grain or white box set with 3 books. Greyhawk has come out. I think Blackmore maybe has come out too. But so she's talking about the rules and trying to just essentially explain to people how do magic users use magic. What's the deal with how you use a spell and then you forget it, and how do you learn it again in the same day, or can you learn it again in the same day? So it's very sort of rule explanation. Tricks and traps, exactly that. Some really good ideas. I really love these kind of things. You can't get too many. There's some great ones in there. There's a room that's spherical, that's got really heavy gravity, so no matter how you walk, you're always going to stick to the wall. It's just a lot of really sort of clever ideas. The Pharaohs Tomb is the adventure for this issue, and then the goodies bag, which are new magical items, and there's a couple there. One of them's by Jim Ward. And I don't think I have a slide for that, but I think I will mention that when we get to the end. So the table of contents was so big, I had to put the contributors here on a second slide. You can see some familiar names, but new people. The people on the right, if I'm thinking correctly, I think are all new. At least they weren't there in the last, they didn't contribute to the last issue, but there's Jim Ward again, and he's taken a really serious role in contributing to this fanzine. He did clearly like it. I did see on another one I was right. He was the first person to subscribe. He really did like this fanzine. Okay, as we say, can never have too many monsters, right? So here's some new ones. Mark Norton, the Zapper. He's the one with these zany ideas. Does his own art usually for his drawings as well. This is a living lightning bolt. If you get near it, it's going to try and zap you, do damage, maybe even blow up your weapons. The Aurora Energy Monster is by Jim Ward. It is a 30-foot wide cloud of gas who has 2 special abilities. One, whatever you attack, it reflects back on you. How about that for defense? Doesn't matter if it's a melee attack, doesn't matter if it's a magical attack, doesn't matter if it's a spell attack, whatever it is, it comes right back at you. And then it will form into something that looks like whoever just attacked it, to sort of just like freak you out. And that's the deal. You basically can't kill it. I've seen some things with Jim dungeon mastering, and he can be a little brutal with the challenge he puts in front of people, and his monsters are a reflection of that. The drawing up there is Jim's next one. I think Jennell probably did the drawing, but it's called the Monster Bomb. It has wings. It flies around. It's the size of a bowling ball. It will explode for 10d8 damage to try and kill you. If it does, it somehow consumes you and then forms itself back together into a sphere and continues to fly around and blow up and kill other things. The only way you essentially can defeat it is once it's exploded, if you can get at least, I think it says 25% of its body and keep it from reforming, then in its unreformed state, eventually it will die. So that's a little challenging as well. Jaquays has the next one, Vorpal Bunnies, inspired by Monty Python. And you can see the drawing there. Well, maybe not very well, but there's a drawing of these bunnies with these giant teeth, and their attacks, he said, they're treated as if they're a vorpal sword. So if they get I think it's a 19 or 20, you're decapitated, and that's just it. You're dead. Jaquays really likes, I think, a lot of animal. She has another thing in different systems she did with ducks that, like, anthropomorphic ducks that can, talk and use weapons and stuff. The Mirror Men, another Jaquays monster, is the shape of a human but made of a mirror, reflects light, can try to blind you with light. It has, as you might imagine, sort of like its attack, its hands are sharp like mirrors that can try to cut you. Just something a little different, I guess, that you could see in a campaign. The next one's by the new contributor, Tom Siterlet, if I'm saying that correctly. And his is the Argaret, and he did his own art for this. This is a really interesting, it's 10, 12 feet tall. He says it's related to goblins, but nothing about it really seems very goblin-like to me. It has like eagle's talon feet, 4 arms with claws, wings that it can use to fly, a unicorn horn, like horn on its head. And it's got this forked tongue, and if it can slap you with its saliva, it can plant its brood in you, and you will become the host body, and then 3 months later, sort of like a scene from Aliens or whatever, I guess, these things will burst from you, and of course you'll die. So the next is Cecil Nurse, if I'm saying that correctly. It says suggested by Kaj Nurse, and this is the Ondoculi. I'll switch here where you can see the photo or the drawing by Jaquays, and it has 2 heads, 4 arms, and 3 legs. And so it's a little bit like an Etten, and those arms can attack, sort of independently. So it even says like one set of arms can be in melee, and the other can shoot a bow at you. But and they say they're a race that lives underground, and then their rat/dog-looking thing that can breathe fire acid at you is called the Golkoduli. And if these things get a hold of you, they're like really hard to get. Once they bite you, it's really hard to get them loose, and so then they can hang on unless you can make like a strength roll. And then once they have a hold of you, then they'll like breathe like a mixture of fire and acid, and you can't escape. It's an automatic hit because they have a hold of you. It's pretty rough. And if you remember the discussion of new monsters in the Dungeoneer number 1, there was something called a wax golem. Well, here Tom Johnson, the contributor, has the dust golem. And you also remember from number 1, there was a new monster called the Uglies. So this guy apparently read issue number 1, and now he's got the dust golem, where he says an ugly forgot to clean out something that had been made a wax golem, and now it's full of dust, and when the wizard tried to use it, it becomes a dust golem. And it's a big, obviously shape. It's very strong. It uses a sword. I'm not really sure how. I guess the dust is really tightly packed together because it seems to have a body that's able to hold a weapon. And so that's his new one, the dust golem. There were really lots of golems in this one. Jim Ward, again, in this episode, and now back with a full-fledged adventure from Jim. Jim is a huge fan of the Egyptian mythos and of undead, and what better way to put those things together than the Pharaohs Tomb. This is a really good adventure. Could be a session or two. It's probably going to kill your characters unless they're really high level, because Jim likes really hard adventures. And this thing's got undead, it has mummies, it has a lich, it has traps, sort of tricks, things you've got to be able to figure out, and some really good treasury rewards that are, of course, because it's Jim, like hidden and really hard to find. But if you can survive the traps and get there, then there's some really good treasure in here. And it also, I do kind of like this. He's got these, huge chests filled with gold, but thousands of pounds. So like, how are you ever going to get that stuff out of there without somebody realizing you're dragging, millions of dollars worth of gold coins out of this tomb? And you may then, of course, in your campaign, have either somebody follow you or attack you and try and steal from you, right? But it's a great adventure as well. I told you I don't have a slide for the goodies bag with the new magic items, but I do want to mention I thought they were both pretty interesting. The first one is essentially just called the Necklace of Warriors, and it's by Tom Filmore, and it's basically a necklace that has beads, a few beads, and when you take a bead off and throw it on the ground, it turns into a warrior who will serve the person that did that, sort of unquestionably, unless you ask it to harm itself or do something where you're sort of intentionally trying to hurt it, and then it says it actually could turn on you. But it's kind of a cool thing, magic item, and it would be great in a campaign if you had somebody who really needed like a henchman or some NPC help. You could put that kind of an item in there, and you could always only have 1 or 2 beads so that they're they use it on that adventure and it's over. I'm a big fan of magical items that have uses and then are used up, so you can give people really cool stuff, and no matter what happens, it's not going to imbalance your campaign because it's a use or 2 and then it's gone. The other magic item in here is called the Discs of Severn, and it's by Jim Ward, and he actually says there's this alchemist who loved scents, and he created these magic items based on scent, and he's got these different type of discs that have a strong scent to them. One is anything that's meat eating, if it smells it basically won't attack you, it'll be so focused on the smell of the meat. The other one is revulsion, so if you smell it then you're like basically can't attack because you're gagging. There's another one of it's somehow the scent activates your sense of greed, and so all you want to do is just stare at it and think about amazing treasure that you wish you had. And then the last one, which is my favorite, is there's smell. I think it says, well, I don't know what the word is, fuge maybe, but if you smell it, you basically go home. Because it's Jim, no saving throw. Nothing, no harm, but like you just basically turn and leave and go home, and you won't come back until the whole party's exited the adventure and you set out a different day. So that's pretty good. I like it. Wouldn't be the most fun in a campaign. You're in the middle of a dungeon, somebody's character has to leave, but it's clever, and Jim's always coming up with brilliant ideas. So I thought I'd share those. Another great fanzine. Jaquays stuff is just top of the line. I'm really looking forward to talking about some other ones to see how they sort of stack up when I read them more carefully to do some of these future videos. That's it, as I like to say. Dungeoneer number 4 from Jennell Jaquays in March of 1977. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying this series. I'm really having a lot of fun doing them. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling the dice.